Good afternoon and welcome to the first Advancing Educational Equity Series, engaging a conversation for post-secondary attainment in the Black and African American community. My name is Teniqua Broughton and I serve as the Executive Director for the state of Black Arizona. My colleagues and I are excited to have such an overwhelming response from the community to engage and participate in this conversation. I cannot express the gratitude that I have to all of my fellows, educators, advocates, and allies on this webinar that are joining us today. Before we begin the webinar, note that the webinar is being recorded. If you find you need to depart early or you know someone who cannot join us but would love to hear the conversation, the recording will be available on the Flinn-Brown website in a day or two after the webinar. For any questions, curiosities, or statements during the webinar, please put them in the Q&A and chat box. Don and Sarah will be tracking them as they are posted. We plan to address as many questions as we can at the end of the presentations. As we continue to experience whiplash from the jarring impacts of the pandemic and the death of unarmed people of color, especially the visibility of Black men, I would like to thank the Flint-Brown program and its leadership, Don Wallace, for supporting my desires to design the series. Far too often in certain cities across the US and in Arizona, I hear people of color express the lack of opportunities to have a seat at the table or constantly not being invited to conversations around issues and concerns that affect them. The state of Black Arizona invited Achieve 60, the Center for the Future of Arizona's Progress Meters, and Expect More Arizona to sit at our table and support the data needs for the work with the future of our mission. This invite is so important for a number of factors. So I want you to just take in these questions because this is what I ask myself as I do my work daily. Do we have the data? Do we track it? And does it work? So just process that for a minute. Do we have the data? Do we track it? And does it work? While some of the individuals who identify as African American may disagree, overall, we see locally and state percentages of our demographics do not always position us well to navigate the concept of data informing decision or policy. When data is not consistently aggregated or disaggregated, or when we are considered a race of people who are statistically irrelevant. Not just me, but we must no longer allow this to happen for communities of color to be missing from the statistics or misrepresented through the access of data. If we cannot access data and execute those questions with clarity, we must have alliances with partners of the dominant culture to move what is necessary for our community and the community as a whole. As a commitment to those questions, all of the organizations on this webinar, you'll hear from me in a later presentation on behalf of Achieve 60's Black and African American Equity Attainment Task Force. It is a task force that is a collective of African American leaders, educators, and business professionals, where I will share our post-secondary attainment strategies that we developed in the latter part of the fall of 2019. I do hope that my words resonate with you today and spark new interest to participating and enacting change in issues that may not affect you day to day or your family. As we begin, I ask you to please open your minds and your hearts to our conversation of tackling systematic challenges, driving awareness, closing the gap, and increasing educational attainment for students of color by 2020 with the support of all Arizonans. So I would like to introduce my first fellow, fellow, I always like to say, we are called fellows, Christine Thompson. Christine serves as the president and CEO of Expect More Arizona. She is passionate about the needs of Arizona's educational system as a top priority for the state. More than a decade, she interned at the Arizona House of Representatives for the Education Committee, which led her career to public policy and then education policy. Christine is a registered lobbyist. She has twin boys, and she loves traveling and astronomy. Please welcome Christine.
Thank you so much, Teniqua, for that great introduction, and thank you for leading this effort and including Expect More Arizona as part of this very important conversation. Just want to thank you for that. I'm going to give an overview today, just a quick overview of what Expect More Arizona is and what we do. We'll dive into some data that makes the case for education, and then we will talk specifically about the progress here. So first, the simplest description of Expect More Arizona's work is that we help people understand what's happening in education, why they should care about it, and what they can do. Because at the core of what we believe is that together we can realize our vision that every student in Arizona has access to an excellent education every step of the way, regardless of their background, their income, or their zip code. Because we know that education unlocks the potential of individuals and communities. And we know education isn't just a private good, but it's a public good as well. It really builds communities. Next slide, please. A more educated population is a healthier population. The average annual public health costs are about $2,700 per high school dropout and only $170 per college graduate. Now let's look at high school, those who've earned high school diplomas. Earning a high school diploma improves quality of health. High school graduates are 60% less likely to be dependent on public health programs. Those with high school diplomas are 6 times less likely to have alcohol abuse than those without a diploma. Studies even show that mortality rates decrease for every additional year of school for both men and women. But we also know that education impacts incarceration rates as well. About 40% of all prisoners lack a high school diploma. And if we take a look at a study that was done about a decade ago, and specifically at the risk of incarceration for Black and African American men aged 30 to 35, those who were high school dropouts had a 69% chance of incarceration. Those with a high school diploma, an 18% chance. And those with some college, a 7.6% chance of incarceration. Now, issues aside of the issues of injustice in the justice system and the structural inequities that we need to address as a community, in education, we really have to identify the barriers to high school graduation to help tackle some of these issues. So next, education also is a tremendous economic driver in our community. Next slide. A strong education sector, pre-kindergarten through higher education, creates, supports, attracts, and sustains diverse Arizona businesses and our community as a whole. A more educated and skilled workforce decreases the dependence on social safety nets that I just talked about. It increases personal and business income, creates more resiliency within economic cycles, and grows revenues for the state to spend on critical needs, like education. And education just isn't a talent pipeline for business. As we've seen during the COVID crisis, working parents and businesses rely on the education sector to help provide a safe, secure environment for children to learn, which then allows more engaged and productive parents and workforce. And the returns on educational investments can really be staggering. So let's think for a moment for a caregiver or parent who has a child that they're going to put into a preschool program. For every dollar that's invested in a pre-kindergartner, there is a 7-time return on investment. And that doesn't even touch the additional economic impact when that caregiver is able to improve their own educational attainment or secure stable employment. Let's look at the downsides of people who don't attain a high school degree or higher. The Mayor's Education Roundtable recent report estimates that the lifetime economic loss for each Arizona student who doesn't complete high school on time is about $500,000 per student. In 2018, we had 18,639 students who didn't complete with their graduating class. That's a $9.3 billion economic loss over the lifetime of those students. And the estimated lifetime economic loss for Arizona's opportunity youth, which is 16 to 24-year-olds who aren't in school and they aren't working, is $96 billion. Now, if we want to look at the more positive side of attainment, College Success Arizona did a study that suggests increasing the attainment levels of working adults in order to meet the future labor market needs of Arizona could have a $7.6 billion economic impact annually to our city. Now, we've reviewed the case really for why education is a public good. Now let's take a look at where we stand today as a state. Next slide. The Arizona Education Progress Meter not only shows us where we are today, but serves as an important reminder of where we've agreed we need to be. We launched the Progress Meter in 2016, a partnership between Expect More Arizona and the Center for the Future of Arizona. And as we developed the Arizona Education Progress Meter, Expect More Arizona brought together diverse communities from across the education spectrum to first agree on what needed to be measured, then to agree on how it should be measured, and then finally to set shared goals in each area to which we all would aspire. We're proud that the Arizona Education Progress Meter has become the widely accepted framework for education conversations from the governor's office to cities and towns, from philanthropy to local school districts. So you might be wondering, now that you're seeing the progress meter, you see where the most recent data is in those larger numbers and the goals below. You might be wondering, hey, we've got 4 years worth of data. Are we on track? We turn to the next slide, you'll see we're not at all on track to meet those goals. We know that unless we work together on the and make the necessary course corrections, we're not going to be anywhere near where we want to be as a state. So let's dig in on a couple of examples. First, let's look at third grade reading on the next slide. Third grade reading, really, people are learning to read up until third grade, and then after third grade, they're using reading as a tool to learn. It's been a priority for the state for a decade, and here we have data since 2015, and we've added a line of best fit to show you the slope of where we're heading. As you can see, the state has moved from about 40% of third graders reading at third grade level at the end of third grade to 46% in the data most recently available from 2019. We aren't on track. We're going to be about 10 points below our stated goal. If you click again, you'll see where white students are. White students perform considerably better. White students, 61% of white students are proficient. They're on track to hit the goal by 2030. If we next look at low-income students perform persistently lower than both the state average and white students. And this is particularly concerning because 53% of third graders tested on the statewide assessment qualified for free and reduced lunch. That's how we're qualifying low-income students. So it's over half of the population is here in this group. Next, if we look to how our Black and African American students are performing, they're performing at roughly the same rate as our low-income students. And while I didn't provide it on the slide here today, you'd see Hispanic students are performing at basically the same level as low-income and Black students, and then Native Americans are performing even 15 points below where low-income students are. It's very clear that we need to be doing different work to really rise the tide for these challenged communities and to work with those communities to identify how best to do that. What's also interesting on this slide is that all of these are the same slope. So the work that we're doing is increasing proficiency for all students, but we're not doing enough to really tackle the special needs of communities that are lagging behind. If we go to the next slide, we'll be looking at high school graduation rates. They've long been monitored. Here I've provided data back to 2018. I'm sorry, back to 2008, but we've got data much farther back. During my 25-year career, we were in the high 60s as a state. Now we are at 78%. We even touched 80 a couple years ago. But we're on a trajectory that is increasing, but not on track to meet our 90% goal. If we look at white students next, the performance of white students has really stagnated over the last decade. White students have been bouncing right around 83% for the last decade, a little higher, a little lower, but they're not on track to meet that 90% goal. If we move to our low-income students, again, performing below the state average and substantially below white students, but low-income students have seen some really tremendous success over the last years, and we need to do even more if we want to get to our statewide goals. If we look at Black students, African-American students, they were above the statewide average in 2008, but now we're right about the same performance of low-income students. And I think this is compared to the last graph on third grade reading, where you saw basically all of the lines were on the same slope. This really demonstrates, and as we go to the next slide, that we need to do a tremendous amount of work, and we can't ignore the diverse needs of our students across the state. We need to make a commitment to invest in the success of low-income students and our students of color, and understand that there's not a one-size-fits-all approach to the education continuum. The physical closures of schools last spring, the virtual environment we're in today, the Black Lives Matter movement this summer, they've all highlighted the glaring, persistent structural inequities and systemic racism that perpetuate the achievement gaps that I've been highlighting today. Everything from nutrition to health, housing to poverty, bias and inequity within justice and discipline systems, English language proficiency, and access to technology and internet. These are all barriers to reaching the goals of the Arizona Education Progress Meter, and must be addressed in order to provide an equitable education to all students and close our achievement gaps. If we want our students to realize their potential so our state can realize its potential, we need to work together, led by the communities most impacted, to determine the best ways to accelerate progress. And with that, I'm happy to turn it back over to Teniqua.
Cool. Thank you, Christine. One of the things I hope you see on this side, 3 and 5 students in Arizona's public K-12 education schools are students of color. And then as we go into this next conversation, think about the data that she presented specifically around high school graduation. So I would like to introduce my second fellow, I would say a colleague I have known for a long time since she started the school. So I'm going to introduce Rachel Yanoff. She serves as the executive director of Achieve 60 Arizona. She is passionate about problem solving the inequities that she sees in schools. She is a former teacher and is the founder of a charter school that was called Phoenix Collegiate Academy. Rachel wants every person to have the opportunity to reach their fullest potential. One of her hobbies is playing with her 3 kids. Welcome, Rachel.
Oh, hello. Okay. Well, these days, one of my hobbies is chasing them and trying to convince them that they really, really want to do online school, which they have had some moments of challenge with. So hi, everyone. I'm so thankful to be here. Teniqua, that was a great introduction. I definitely feel really passionate about this work on every level, and I'm just so excited that we can start having these conversations and moving from where we started with sort of an attainment for all perspective to acknowledging that it has to be attainment for our Black African-American students, it has to be attainment for our tribal communities and nations, and it has to be attainment for our Latino students. Otherwise, we're missing the mark. So we'll get into that in a second. If you don't mind clicking me to the next one. So the big goal that was set in 2016, and I will always give massive credit to everybody else because I was still running a school at this time. So a lot of thoughtful people came together and said, Arizona can and should be able to achieve a 60% attainment rate, which we defined as 25-year-olds to 64-year-olds by the year 2030. So this is a snapshot goal. So basically imagine it's December 31st, 2030, and we're gonna see how many people have a certificate, license, or degree, 2 or 4 years or more, in that moment. And again, we're looking at the adult population. So if you wanna know who that means today, subtract about 10 years, right? So we're talking about 15-year-olds, so sophomores, probably juniors in high school, up through people who are probably in the last couple of years of their career. And what are they doing and how are they staying relevant in the workplace? Click. We've made some progress, as Christine also showed you. When we first started tracking, we were about 42%. Now we're at about 46%, which is awesome. It's fantastic. And as you saw with every line that Christine showed you as well for all the other metrics, the rocket launch we need to make is a different trajectory. If we're gonna hit this 60% goal, the slope has to change. And how do we do that, right? Those are the big questions. We also wanna be very real that while percentages are helpful to talk about, I always am humbled by what it means for actual human beings. What is that number? So if you click one more time, it's approximately 1 million more adults, which is a lot. And I always joke, but it was pretty true. No one told me that number when I took the job. I think I would have had a little more anxiety. Thinking about how we move 1 million more people to and through to credential and degree completion is the job in front of us. So let's talk a little bit about how that's going to happen. Next slide. So we know that we can't just expect that one part of the system is going to change attainment. And we know that at Achieve 60, even though our job is mostly to focus on attainment, there's a whole bunch of pieces that move in. So we needed to bucket it. And the first thing we said was there's an entire pipeline of kiddos. And that is basically early childhood through high school, right? We know students learn the whole way along. And at Achieve 60, we support the fact that that has to exist. We can't just say when a kid turns 18, they matter and they better attain. So really saying this bucket is incredibly important, and how do we help and support and uplift that pillar, right? That pillar of the work. The second pillar for us is that post-secondary access and success. Who's getting into, who's aware of, who has the financial assistance to be successful in the post-secondary system, all parts of it, private post-secondary, public post-secondary, but it all needs to be something that everyone can learn about and be successful in. There's a huge role for business and workforce development. And what I always tell people is if you don't see this slide and see yourself in it, then I've not done my job, because we tried to get everybody, right? If you run a business and if you are a business leader in this community, there are things that you also can do and are part of when we talk about the attainment equation, right? Making sure that we have the jobs that attract highly skilled workforce so that they want to be in Arizona, and so that we don't just train up really smart kiddos and they all move to Denver, or we don't have really great people who are not able to stay here and support their family. We want to ensure that people are learning through their employer, which is a really great opportunity. So this whole idea of business and workforce development is another pillar of how we will reach attainment. And then lastly, there are systems and structures, and certainly we're talking today about large systematic inequities and challenges, and how do we change those? How do we track those? Back to Teniqua's point, if we don't even know the data and we're not even seeing if we're making progress, then we're certainly going to miss the mark. So we want to be part of talking about how those systems and structures reflect well on the entire system. So next step, as an organization, we said these are the pillars. But we actually are not doing any of that. So I want to be very, very clear. Achieve 60 is the name of the goal. And then the organization is a small team, but we have a couple main things that we believe. One, click, our vision. And this is the same vision in just different word order that Christine's organization has, I'm sure that Teniqua's organization has, that we want to see a thriving Arizona, for all citizens. Certainly, we see this as being incredibly important that our diversity of our state is uplifted and that everyone has that chance to be thriving in the economy, right? They're able to have a job, they're able to pay their bills, their kids and their family are happy. We believe that that actually changes trajectories of lives, and Condoleezza Rice said it better, but education, as far as we can tell, is the tool we have. It is imperfect, it is not the only tool, but it is a tool that is widely distributed among our society, and to use that the best that we can. Next click. we work through an alliance. So I showed you all these pillars. Again, Achieve doesn't do any of those things, actually. What we do is we bring all of our partners together and say, how can we do this work together? So State of Black Arizona, right? We know that there's a whole reach that they have that we do not have. And we want to support and develop and uplift anything we can with them, similar to all of our other partners. And then the last thing, if you click one more time, what we've really said is that our job is to hold the North Star goal, right? To make sure that this goal is something that we remember, that we work toward, that we all are driving in the ways that make sense for us, and that we as Achieve 60 are giving people good data, good information, that we're empowering the leaders who are, able to make the decisions and make the policies, that they have what they need to do the best for all communities and for all populations. Next click. So, I only have a few slides to show you with directories, I promise, but we just wanted to share to build on Christine's point, that the attainment directories are pretty stark. So for our Black African American community, they're starting at about 36% attainment and moving to 60%. When we had these task forces, one of the questions that was asked immediately was, this doesn't really jive with what we're seeing in our K-12 system, where we're seeing that a lot of our Black students are not successful. And what we learned through some work that we were able to partner with some community members on is that Arizona is actually a really attractive place for attracting new members to our state. We're a growing state, and we attract really highly talented Black African American community members, which is fantastic. But we can't assume that attraction is going to be the only way that we're going to meet our numbers. We have to serve the students in Arizona as well. And so when we talk later about strategies, Teniqua can talk about how we tried to address both of those issues. But I also want to share, just because we did do task forces with all three of our subgroups. So we had Black African American. If you click one more time, this is our Native and tribal community attainment. So they're starting at about 18% attainment with a goal of 60%. Again, there's a lot of work to be done, and that's a whole nother webinar. So we'll save that for later, but know that that is work that we are also thinking and holding deeply about what does it mean about a system where 18% of those students are successful in post-secondary. And then also for Latino students. So progress also been made in attainment. They're at 30%, which is fantastic, but a long way to go to 60%. So I think the next slide, I get to be quiet for a minute. Oh, nope, just kidding. One more slide. And then Teniqua is going to take over. So click, yeah, go ahead. Back one more. Back, there we go. So I just want to share a little bit about this equity goal setting. So Achieve 60, I said, we do a bunch of different things, but really the work that we've been engaging in for the last 2 years around equity was spurred by a grant we received through WICHE, which is the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education, and the Lumina Foundation. And they basically said, we're not going to tell you how to do it, but we know that just throwing spaghetti at the wall and saying, everybody go attain, actually isn't the right way to do it. So you figure out, state of Arizona, how you want to address equity goal setting. And so we first sort of took the raw data, we took that on a roadshow around Arizona and said, here's what we know as just the raw attainment numbers for subgroups, and then asked people, about 25 to 30 members per subgroup committee that we did on a task force to help us strategize. And so we met monthly, actually over monthly, to really figure out not only a goal for attainment, because it's important that there's a goal, but what are the strategies that are going to get us there? And I want to be really clear, Achieve 60, I know who I am. I'm a white woman. My colleague is also a white woman. We knew at the beginning that we weren't going to be the people who could lead or should lead this process, but that we had this opportunity with some funds to help bring together a conversation that we hoped could be really helpful. So we asked community members to come together. We asked people from the community to facilitate the conversations. You can see from the picture some of the work that they were doing, and we just got to be listening. We got to offer support where we could, but this was really community-led and community-driven. And I just want to put a bug in your ear, because we'll get to it in a minute. We are moving to action, coming soon. So don't leave us. We're headed in that direction. Next click. So here's the goal that was set by this task force. So they set a goal of 60%, and I will let Teniqua talk more about why this was the goal and what the strategies sort of allude to. But I also want to say, I think it's really important, and we certainly were so, it felt really special to be in the room to hear the group talk about the fact that it matters as a community to set a goal that's ambitious and that is on par with the state. They said that it also is really important because it's somewhat easy to say, well, only 5 or 6% of the population, maybe they get discounted or not included, sort of to what Teniqua was saying earlier, that coming together matters. And it was really encouraging and just so, I just felt so honored to be there to hear this conversation of we matter, collectively we matter, and we want to be in this conversation. So Teniqua, I'm gonna let you take it over to talk about the strategies.
Thank you, Rachel. And thank you for queuing it up around the 60%, because people will say, wow, we are at 36% as African Americans. That is a lot to do in the next 10 years to move forward. And what I can share with you, as Rachel said, is we decided as a collective that we didn't want to set a lower goal or a different goal. We wanted to strive for it. So next slide, please. So I'm going to share, there are 8 strategies, if you can put them all up, but I won't go through every single one of them. While I am excited about all the things that we have agreed upon as a collective, what I want to say to the group today is that these are strategies you're getting to see firsthand before the report has actually gone out, which will go out in September. So we are hopefully asking you to get excited about how you can be a part of executing these strategies. We have much more, but the action to these have not taken place. So I will address about 4 of them so you can understand what the conversation was with the group. As I shared in my opening, it was educators, there were business professionals, there were institutions, educational institution leaders there who across the state who helped put these strategies together. So I'm going to address the first one, which was requiring disaggregated reported data, including by race and ethnicity, geographic region, and age to drive the target action and change towards post-secondary attainment. While people may not know, we don't have this consistently, and that's why early in the presentation, I really wanted you to think about those 3 questions, because if we don't have the data and we're not tracking it, how do we know it works? But how are we able to actually keep people accountable, or to help keep ourselves accountable if we're not able to do that consistently? The second one is number 3, which is to focus attention and resources on the unique needs of Black and African American community to ensure that the pandemic economic fallout does not exacerbate the opportunity gaps between racial and ethnic groups. So this was huge for us because we knew that while there are different communities of color who were gathering, we all have different ways of how our strategies would be approached. And now that we know with the pandemic, things are more exacerbated than they are before, where are we going to be in moving forward our goals? So a conversation we had as simple as, you know, maybe every year we're moving forward our goals every 2%, or 3%. That is ambitious, but what we realize is that we want to be mindful if we are going to move forward, that we have to also keep in account what has happened with the pandemic, and we set these goals before that happened. The third one I want to address is number 6, which is designing career training opportunities such as internships and apprenticeships around community needs and where Black and African American adults are underrepresented in the workforce, and to increase the number of employers with policies to support adult learning. So I would say Shamia Lodge, who is from Mass Mutual, has been huge about making sure that we are utilizing the programs that employers have or should be creating, specifically around the opportunities for adult learners. We don't have the specifics of, I think, all of the adult learners, if they have certificates, but the goal is if we want to move people forward, we need the business community to help us. We also know that there are programs that are designed, but we need programs that are truly more designed for the training opportunities, the internships and the apprenticeships. And I would say specifically too, in those areas where we are saying this is where our economy is going, and allowing our students to be able to do that. And then the last one, which is number 7, is to increase the number of P12 institutions with a public commitment to cultural competency and diversity. This was a huge conversation for us, and I think a lot of people felt as if there is the ability to say that we are a Hispanic serving institute, and we have not heard that in the Black community. And what we want is institutions to say we are a Black serving community. We are welcoming, Black and African American students to our institutions so that they know that they are welcome and you are striving to help us. So this one is huge for us, as well as in those programs where you are educating kids, that we're making sure that there's cultural competency around them understanding before they leave the universities, than waiting until they actually are in the classroom. So that is just 4 of the 8 strategies. I know that people want to get a hold of this. The report will come out next month, but you're welcome to connect with Rachel and I if you want to be a part of it. We will be putting together a list of organizations and individuals who want to help move this forward. And on behalf, I would say, of the task force, I am taking the lead if anybody is interested in joining this moving forward. So Rachel, I'll hand it back off to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Teniqua. It just seemed really silly that I should talk about the work that Teniqua actually was part of. So I'm really thankful that I got to put you on the spot to do that. So thank you again. If we can click to the next slide. I just want to share, so we did the same work with both our Latinx and our tribal nations and communities. And if you can click twice, it's small, I'm sorry, it is going to be in our it's going to be in our report. Click one more time. But I just wanted to give everyone a chance, I guess one more time. I'm sorry, I really like animations, but I wanted to give everyone a chance to look for a second. And you can see that there's some common threads. There's a lot of commonality around data, which again goes back to like what do we know and what do we not know, and how are we communicating that. There's a lot of conversation around this idea of cultural competence and what does that mean in educational settings, post-secondary, K-12, early ed, all the way through. You can see that, of course, COVID and what the impact of inequities in a pandemic have really, pushed and challenged the systems. So those are some of the commonalities that came through. We also thought it was incredibly important that you just get a chance, I know this is quick, to see that there's differences. And that's important, that we wanted to also illuminate that, as I said, right, the spaghetti for all approach of attainment, we're just gonna say, here's attainment, go figure it out. That's not actually gonna work. And if it did work, it might actually inversely create larger academic gaps, because we could have more white people attaining, because that strategy might be only culturally competent for that group, which is not actually sort of solving the challenge, right, of all of these equity gaps. So we really wanted to make sure that we called out the differences and the strategies that are unique and special to every community. If you click one more time, hopefully you're just like frothing at the mouth at this point, and you just want to know, how do I get involved? So Teniqua said a little bit of it. So step 1, if you click one time, we will have our report coming out in October. I cannot speak for the Flinn Foundation, but I'll ask if we can do another webinar, and you can be part of that and learn all about all the strategies and all of the conversations. And we are happy to share. It is our goal to see that everybody gets a copy of it and everybody can find action within it. So please know, coming soon. Second is this call for partners. So Teniqua said she's happy to take your name down. We're happy to take your name down. I will say it every time I ever talk. Achieve 60 doesn't do programs. We want to facilitate, we want to support, we want to get national funders to give us money to give it back so that other people can do it. But we want to make sure that the action is actually happening through the partners and the communities that are most impacted. So please be our partner in this work. And then the last bullet is that we did make a commitment to all 3 task forces to bring everyone together. We have not actually done that yet, to really share, here's what our commonalities are and how can we create that common platform. But then also, again, to not let the differences go by the wayside. So if there are specific and unique things, to Teniqua's point, There's a designation for a Hispanic serving institution. There's a designation for a Native serving institution. There is not a designation for a Black serving institution other than HBCU. So how do we address that and not lose that conversation among the commonalities, but also address the differences? So that's what we want to do. We're hoping we'll be out of Zoom world by then. But even if we're not, it's going to be the most exciting Zoom call you've ever had in your whole life. And we would love to invite all of you to be a part of that task force, or sort of equity convening, I should say. So I so appreciate you. If you click the last slide, Brianna and I are both Flinn-Brown Fellows, so we both of our faces are there. You can find us in the directory, and I can't even just say enough. Like, this is the best work we've gotten to do. It is the most important work we've gotten to do. Attainment matters for all, for sure, but attainment matters for Black communities, because we know that those numbers, they mean real lives, real people. And I always tell this story, but I'll tell it again. The first time we hired an employee in South Phoenix, and she had weekends off, and she was 50 years old. For the first time in her life, she had weekends off, and she asked me what this whole thing about retirement was. It changed her life and her family's life. And if we do this job and this work well, Attainment does that for people that I can't even name, that I don't know, but that is the work that we get to do, and it's so, so great. So equity work for the people who are furthest from this attainment goal, it just fills my heart. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. And thanks for the excitement around this. This is very exciting, I will say. And anytime doing a task force in the beginning and trying to figure out stuff, it's ebb and flows of highs and lows, but I think we got to a really great place where we got some things on paper. So as I see in the chat box, people are asking questions. Just keep putting them in there, and at the end, we'll be able to address them. And if panelists, you want to go in and go ahead and address it, because we probably won't be able to get to all of it, it is welcome as well. So I am going to move forward with our last presentation. And this person is Felicia Ganther. Felicia Ganther serves as the Associate Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs at Maricopa Community College District, and she also is chair-elect on our board, so soon to be my boss. She is passionate about making sure students have access and mobility to post-secondary opportunities and research, and I have seen her willing to go the mile to make sure that students of color remain in school. Felicia just recently completed her doctorate degree in education, and her hobbies are spending time with her family and traveling. If you are looking to win her over, impress her in any way, show up with some type of Wonder Woman item, and you just might get a smile on her face. So welcome, Felicia.
Thank you so much. First, I want to say to all of you, the 200 plus folks that are on this call, you have got me into professional attire today. The last 3 months, I've been wearing t-shirts and shorts. I had to iron last night. My son was in shock that I was ironing clothes today. So I want to thank you all for coming and joining with us. On a serious note, though, this work is near and dear to my heart, and so I'm going to probably be slightly passionate, but take my passion as care and concern, and I'm going to try my best not to elevate my voice. But let's go to the next slide. So I do want to spend just 2 seconds first giving a shout out to Maricopa Community College, our system, our chancellor, Stephen Gonzalez, and my boss, the provost, Carla Fisher, who allows me to serve on the State of Black Arizona. So I want to thank them. I do want to send a shout out to 2 groups. One are the employees who serve on the Maricopa Council of Black American Affairs, who are online. And then I want to send a shout out to the School of Community Resources and Development, where I recently graduated with a PhD. So a lot of this work that I'm doing now is because of these entities, and I am honored to serve. People always ask, what is the State of Black Arizona? I want to let you know that we were an initiative under the Arizona Community Foundation and Arizona State University for some time, and we published several volumes. However, in 2015, we moved into being a nonprofit organization who focuses on education, civic engagement, economics, health, and justice. And as well, I want to honor our current chair, Gary Walters, and our board members, Darnica Riley and Willard James, who serve alongside our executive director, Teniqua. And we tackle this stuff on a month-to-month basis, ensuring that our work is tied to synthesis of data, doing research on the status of African Americans in our state, effective action planning and decision-making that impacts our issues and concerns, and encouraging a concerted effort. That means we want to be in the spaces and places where we can bring organizations and stakeholders together to move this work forward. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about the socioeconomic pipeline. I want to thank Christine and Rachel for being so honest in what they presented to us this afternoon. But I want you to understand that African Americans are the third largest population in Arizona. If you put us all in the same town, we would be in the middle of the size of Chandler and the size of Mesa. So that's a lot of folks. However, when it comes to our median income, we're about $600 less than AZ's median income, which is around $59,000. 25% of our population lives in poverty in comparison to 12% for our white counterparts. And 64% of our folks have no credential or degree who are over the age of 25. And that's in comparison to about 52% for our white counterparts. Next slide. So, you know, we all want this. This is the future that we want for Arizona. I want to see every African-American student who is in the pipeline and every African-American who needs to retool or re-career to have a picture like this, that they are graduating with a degree or a credential. Okay, so we know, Rachel provided to us that we're at 36, 37% for those 25 and higher, right? And we know that we have this goal to increase post-high school enrollment by 70%, to increase attainment by 60%. Next slide. But this is a problem. This is a problem for us. Now, I've been here 8 years, 2012 when Achieve 60 began. I had the opportunity of writing the first State of Black Education report in 2015. I had an opportunity to work alongside faculty from Arizona State University to write the State of Black Arizona report for 2017. And I want to send a shout out to Amy Pack, the minority education effort out of the state. The challenge that I see is that our educational pipeline for African Americans has not moved for almost 20 years. And that is not good. And so that means we've got to look at this stuff and we've got to look at it in detail in order for us to make some changes. So let me just highlight these things. These are just 4 things that I picked out that I felt were important. So we're talking about we need more of our young African Americans to be college ready or more moving towards college. Well, the problem that we have right now is all the students that participate in college prep, that's AP programs, advanced placement, dual enrollment, only 3% of them are African American in comparison to their white counterparts, which is 50%. ACT has four areas that they look at to say, hey, a student is college ready. Of those 4 subject areas, only 9% of African Americans who are coming out of our high schools are college ready in comparison to their white counterparts who are at 35%. Then ABOR in 2017 put out a report that said of the students in their first semester of high school senior year that have met all of the requirements to be eligible for admissions to an Arizona university, only 37% of African Americans who are in their first semester of senior year made the cut. That means almost 7 out of 10 African-American high school seniors are not meeting all of the requirements to move into the universities. Post-high school enrollment. Upon graduation, 50% of our students are moving on in comparison to their white counterparts, 58%. But if you drill down, almost 30% are at community colleges, and then the largest next group is enrollment in private and proprietary schools. Next slide. So in 2018, I did 6 focus groups with African-American students who had graduated from high school in June and were in their first month of enrollment at our community colleges. Did 6 focus groups. And these 2 statements were statements that just stuck with me because I kept hearing it over and over again. And so I kept going back to the data and then going to their voices. And the reality is we have a lot of work to do. We really need to focus on this. Next slide. And here's what I'm thinking that we can do. First of all, we need an African-American community-based solution because we know that while we want our schools to do better, they're tapped out. And there might not necessarily be immediate strategies that can be put into place to help our students in the K-12 system. So we as African Americans need to come together and create a community-based solution that has strategically targeted efforts that are situated in incremental growth strategies. We have to. We need to align the work of various organizations, churches, and community entities. Now, I'm going to tell you, in this state, there's a lot of silos. There's a lot of great programs, but often their reach is 50 to 100 students, maybe 25 students. We have to align these organizations around big ticket items in order for us to see the progress that we want. If we continue to operate in silos, we will not get the results that we are expecting for our students. Second, we need a partnership between the African American community and essential stakeholders. We have to cultivate an African American college-going culture in this state. It has to be first and foremost, from kindergarten all the way up. We have to cultivate. And second, we have to cultivate an awareness and behavioral changes towards upward mobility. Number one, we need to let them know that opportunities exist, that African Americans who need to retool, re-career, who need to change in jobs, that there are opportunities for them, that there are low cost and no cost training, certifications, and degrees, and that there is a job or a career at the end of that training. And that's how we're going to move the needle for our educational pipeline and for our retooling and re-careering. Next one. So I love John Lewis and I'm with him. Something is not right. It's not just. There is an obligation and that we have to do something about it. Next slide. So for African Americans, here's what I say, 5 things. Number one, you got to be informed, equipped, and driven towards data-derived outcomes. That's the purpose of the State of Black Arizona and the work that we're doing with Expect More and Achieve 60. We've got to be willing to come out of the silos and rally around concerted efforts. 3, we have to provide consistent care and concern for these efforts. We have to show our young people that we care about them, that they can trust us, and that we're going to be there for them. Number 4, connecting the in-migrating African Americans to this work. I came to the state of Arizona in 2012 from Chicago. Matter of fact, Phoenix has the highest percentage in-migration of African Americans out of most cities in the last 2 to 3 years. So we've got to connect folks who are not connected to this state, to this work. right? They're sitting in C-suites, they're sitting in leadership roles in corporate entities, and they may have opportunities that they can help to lift our educational pipeline and our recareering. Finally, be willing to roll up your sleeves and get into the work. This is necessary work. We can no longer sit back and continue to talk about it. We have to do something about it. Next slide. For our allies, for those of you who are not African American, first you have to identify ways to help. Second, you have to identify ways your organization or your entity can help. Third, you have to ensure that the African American voice is present, right? Is the African American voice present in your boardrooms, in your leadership structures, in your hiring and promotion processes, in your committees and task force? That's what you and your organization can do to support. Is there a specific skill set, something that you can provide to help us move the needle? We need to know where you are, who you are, and how you can help. And finally, you know, there is a lot of work being done around diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? Given all the things that have happened since Minneapolis and Louisville. But the question I ask is, are the goals and the efforts that you are currently doing, are they truly closing the attainment gap? That's what I want you to go back and ask, is it doing something, right? Have you set up a process where you're helping your folks who are African American, who are your employees who may not necessarily be in leadership roles? Are you helping them to get in some type of professional development? Are you connecting them to the employee benefits so that they can go back to school? Are you mentoring them? For churches and organizations, what are you doing in order to support your students when you know that they are not getting the support that they need in their high schools and their elementary schools? Are you creating the environments inside of your churches and your organizations to help those students? These are the things that we are hoping that you do. Next slide. So I see a lot of folks who want to be involved, they want to get engaged. So here's two opportunities. One, you can reach out to me or Teniqua. I'm Felicia at stateofblackarizona.org. Teniqua is Teniqua at stateofblackarizona.org. You can email us, and here's what I ask. Email us who you are, what you're interested in, and how you can help. The three things that we need. For those of you who are interested in helping students who are in the higher education pipeline, particularly those who are being supported in the community colleges, you can reach me at myfelicia.ganther@domel.maricopa.edu. We have efforts that we are working on to advance and support students of color, particularly African Americans. And if you want to get in on this work, I want you to get in on this work. So with that, I will turn it back over to Teniqua, and I thank you all for taking time to join us today.
Thank you, Felicia. Dr. Ganther, always passionate. I'm inspired. I feel like I need to get to work right now. I want to thank Felicia, I want to thank Christine, and I want to thank Rachel, because all of you in the last few weeks came together to do this on behalf of this passion that I had a desire, and I'm glad that everybody on this call has had the opportunity to really hear why this was important. So Don, I'm going to hand it over to you to field us through questions.
Great. Well, first, Teniqua, I wanted to thank you so much for bringing together this amazing panel. Obviously, some important work being done in the community. It's certainly the goal for the Arizona Center for Civic Leadership to provide a platform for good public policy conversations. But, you know, particularly for our Flinn-Brown Fellows, who we are so proud of, and the work and the contributions that they make to our community. So thank you again for being a leader and coming to bring all these folks together. Now, I will tell you, we've had many, many questions, but many of them were answered through the course of the presentation. So I'm going to focus on ones that were not answered. And we probably will have maybe another 5 to 10 minutes if folks want to stay on the line. I think we're losing some folks, but stay with us. Since the focus of this program today was really on post-secondary attainment. I'm going to start with a few K-12 pipeline questions that were presented to us. And I think this is, you know, Rachel and Dr. Ganther, both of you were also practitioners, you know, high school founder, teacher. Rachel, you didn't say that you were also a teacher, Teach for America. Dr. Ganther, some of the questions are around what are the best practices for youth, particularly children of color, around that the successful K-12 pipeline into post-secondary, including programs like college credit coursework, like dual enrollment, like advanced placement, and how does CTE factor in to this as well? Both of you have experience with this, and if Rachel, you want to start, maybe Dr. Ganther, you could follow.
Happy to. And I bet Dr. Ganther has the statistics at her fingertips. But you know, we definitely at Achieve 60 see that a huge opportunity for students to get college experience, college confidence, and legit credit, which transfers to dollars, is to have those early opportunities, right? So AP, IB, and CTE programs, some of those have college credit connected to them. Some of them have a pathway that at the end they can have their associates and graduate, you know, across the stage with 2 degrees or a diploma and a degree. So absolutely, I think that, again, and I'll let Dr. Ganther expound upon this more, what we see in the data is that it's not equal, that students who are from more low income, and certainly Black, Latino, and Native American students, whether low income or not, are less likely to have access and opportunity to those kinds of classes. And again, to Dr. Ganther's point, they're not always career or pathway connected. So they might take a bunch of AP classes, but if those classes don't transfer into the university system, then that was a waste of their time and energy and money. So the systems that around all of these great opportunities and best practices have to catch up so that every single student gets the same output of that effort. And Dr. Ganther, please take it away.
Thank you. I had to find the mute button. I totally agree. I am a grand supporter of dual enrollment because, number one, the student is already sitting in the class, in their high school class. They're already sitting in the class. They're doing the work, and they can be getting credit for college as well as high school at the same time. And all of our community college districts are involved in this work. And I speak for Maricopa. We have 5,000 students who are in these dual enrollment courses at the high schools, and often a significant percentage of them are very close to completing an associate's degree by the time they graduate from high school. So for us, it's an awareness and an understanding, right? And then there's the financial point of it. Well, the issue that I'm concerned with is, how is the information being shared to the students in the high schools? How are we encouraging students of colors to take advantage of it? And how are we helping them to fund the cost of attendance? We in Maricopa provide a specific grant for dual enrollment students who are experiencing some level of financial need. And we will take care of those students. In some of our community college districts, the students can attend the dual enrollment courses for free. So we have an opportunity here to help. CTE is critical because a lot of our students just don't know what workforce and technical jobs are out there for them. They don't even know that some of these jobs have very high salary offerings of $60,000, $70,000 out the door. And that's not even attending school for 2 full years, you know? And so seeing the value point in that, right? Because sometimes our students only see teachers and police officers and principals. They don't get to see other individuals who have occupations in these other career and technical areas to understand and know what those jobs do and how it will be important for them to get started now, so that by the time they graduate from high school and maybe within that first year out, they already have a career. So I think it's very important for us to build some awareness around that.
You're muted. Dawn, you're still muted. There you go.
Okay, good. Some of the questions that were asked by participants really stemmed around whether our strategies for success should be a P20 perspective. You know, should we start as early as birth to far beyond college in terms of helping our youth in the education pipeline? So one of the questions, and I think this is probably best asked of Teniqua and Christine, is how are we educating parents of children of color in their role in helping their children through the educational pipeline? We've heard a lot of wonderful strategies and work that's going to be happening, but how are we integrating parents, community, into that overall call to action?
Christine, I can go first with an actual organization. So thanks, Don, for the question. My experience in the different institutions that I've worked with and working with parents, a lot of times they're challenged with how do I actually advocate for my child. How comfortable am I in actually going in there and telling the administration specifically what I want and need? And I may not be able to do that as well. And so there's an organization called Black Mothers Forum. Janelle Woods, who is one of our fellows, who is leading that. And I think she and a team of mothers are really a great job to try to make sure that our mothers, our parents, those families have a better understanding to how to advocate at school boards and how to ask what they need, and also how to keep administration accountable for some of the things that are happening to our kids. Say, if you have not heard of it, Black Mothers Forum is an organization that you need to connect with, and Janelle Woods is one of our fellows.
To piggyback off of that, I think it's not only with school boards and with administrations, but it's just being a voice for your, a voice for your student, kind of understanding that incredible relationship to have with a teacher to help understand what your child's going through and what their unique needs are in order to advocate them both at the classroom level and higher. And I think that holds true for all parents I've got twins, and I'm trying to learn that myself, how to be an adequate voice for them, understand where they are academically, and be a champion for them, and really developing that relationship with their teachers. Teachers appreciate that parents and caregivers are their child's first teacher, to really emphasize that as important.
So we have one more question. And I will leave this to the entire panel. What do you all think the role of implicit bias is in primary education? How does it impact the achievement gap for Black African American students?
I can say from a firsthand like having been a teacher, and if Nikita Ross is on this call, she'll laugh. So I became a teacher, and I taught in South Phoenix, and all my students were Latino and Black, and I was 21 years old. And, I was taught that I need to walk in and like save the world, right? That I'm like the white knight who knows the answer. And that the curriculum and the textbook and everything that's in front of me is gonna help my students. And it took a long time to even understand and know that there were words like implicit bias, and that everything I was doing, and I don't mean to toot my own horn, I think I had a good heart. Like I want to do this work because I genuinely love kiddos. But if we don't explicitly teach and force and challenge, then people can't grow. And I hope I'm growing. I have a long way to go. And I think, one step is some of the strategies that the task force identified, right? Like if I, as Rachel, who gets to do this awesome work at Achieve 60, can't acknowledge that we need to say it's attainment for Black students, and push back on throwing spaghetti at the wall, then I'm not doing my work. If I'm not talking about the fact that systems are not equal, and helping to have those conversations, then we're not doing the work. So I would share that from a very personal journey of 17 years in education and starting at a place that I've hopefully come some of the way from, we have to teach people that, though, because it doesn't show up anywhere in sort of education, school, at least in the formal ways, that I think we can do better at. And Teniqua, you want to say something, I know.
I think that's a whole webinar in itself. So because we are over time, I won't say much more, but I think that it is the root of where we need to start. Those are the challenges that are in front of us. And when we decide that that's not something we want to tackle or cover or push to the side, it will be a part of all of the challenges of any of the strategies that we do. So I always have that thought of, like, culture eats strategy. And so if culture eats strategy, we can have all these great strategies, but if we know that implicit bias has us by the neck and it will not allow us to move forward, then these strategies just literally are just that on paper.
Teniqua, if I could just add really quickly, I think it's important to have those conversations outside of the education bubble. And right now, in the midst of an election, we need to be highlighting the needs of our students, the systemic racism, the challenges that students have as part of the political conversation when we're electing everyone from the top of the ticket down to school board members, because all of them have an impact ultimately on our children's education. So that's incredibly important too. So remember, the conversation isn't just in schools, it's more broadly in the political sphere as well.
Absolutely.
So Teniqua, I think we're out of time, and it was actually our last question. I wanted to just thank you again, hand it over to you to kind of conclude this wonderful webinar. And we hope to do, this is a series, so we have many more in our future as partners, along with other organizations who are doing important work. So I'll leave it to you to end our wonderful time together.
Well, thank you, Dawn. Thank you again for I like to say, hearing my voice and not just having my body sit there. So thank you. And to Sarah for always being a champion, and to the CEO, Tammy McLeod, for always supporting me. Christine, Rachel, and Dr. Ganther, we got work to do. So I am going to invite you all back to the table again. And to everybody else on the call, we really do encourage you to be a part of this. We wanted to start the conversation. We know there's a lot of work to do. We have even more strategies for community leaders and business leaders. And so I think, Don, the best way at this point is we'll take Felicia's call to actions, and then the call to actions I have specifically to communities, and then we can put it up there for people to access. So I thank everyone for their time, the ability to also stay on for an extra few minutes, and we hope to see you again in our inboxes, as well as on the next Flint-Brown CivEx workshop. Thank you so much, and have a great day.